Millionaire replaced pregnant wife with Mistress on his calendar but forgot her birthday was in gold ink. Have you ever wondered how a single slip of the pen, or in this case, a gleaming stroke of gold ink, could unravel an entire life of luxury, secrets, and meticulously crafted lies? Tonight, we peel back the curtain on the shocking story of Richard Kensington, a millionaire real estate mogul whose prized schedule was a masterwork of precision, until one fateful mistake revealed everything. This is a tale of a pregnant wife's heartbreak, a mistress's relentless pursuit of wealth and status, and the chilling consequences of betrayal. So, settle in and brace yourself for a roller coaster ride of drama, deception, and unbelievable twists. Richard Kensington was not born into wealth. Raised in a modest neighborhood in Philadelphia, he watched his parents struggle to pay the bills. That memory, etched deep into his psyche, pushed him to work relentlessly from a young age. In college, he discovered his talent for deal-making and uncanny ability to talk investors into funding ambitious real estate projects. By the time he reached 35, he had transformed himself into a millionaire, buying lavish properties in Beverly Hills, New York City, and an expansive vacation estate in the Bahamas. In social circles, Richard gleamed with a magnetic charm. He was tall, impeccably dressed, and had a confident stride that could disarm even the fiercest competitor. His handshake alone seemed to exude the promise of lucrative opportunities. Over the years, he became a revered figure, famous enough that his name was whispered with reverence in upper-crust gatherings, and envied enough that rumors circulated about how he had climbed so fast. His wife, Laurel Kensington, maiden name Laurel Crane, came from a respected Philadelphia family. More reserved than her husband, she balanced his brashness with her gentle manner. Their marriage was once considered a symbol of love and stability. She, the loyal spouse who supported him during his sleepless nights building an empire. He, the brilliant entrepreneur who provided her with a life most could only dream about. For a long time, they stood side by side, a dynamic duo until cracks began to form. Before the scandal that would upend their lives, Laurel discovered she was pregnant. The news seemed to bring Richard unprecedented joy. He boasted to his associates about having an heir, even discussing the possibility of naming the child Richard Jr. if it was a boy. Laurel's belly soon became the focus of every family function, every business gala, and every holiday celebration. Everyone congratulated them, assuming the couple was stepping into a new, happier phase of life. But beneath the surface, Richard was changing. He began returning home later than usual and making hushed phone calls in corners of the house. He was more protective of his personal devices, his phone, his laptop, and especially his leather-bound daily planner, in which he wrote everything in black ink except for special occasions, birthdays, anniversaries, major charity events. Those were written in gold ink, a small quirk that Laurel had always found charming. It was a sign of how meticulously he mapped out each day of his life. Little did Laurel know that this golden detail would become the key to revealing a hidden dimension of her husband's life. As the months passed and her pregnancy progressed, her own role in Richard's day-to-day existence seemed overshadowed by the demands of his business dealings. At night, he would retreat to his study, flipping through that leather-bound planner under the warm glow of a desk lamp, scribbling notes, and rarely sharing what was on his mind. It was a picture-perfect life on the outside, but inside those walls, tension simmered, waiting for the moment when everything would explode. Laurel often helped Richard organize his personal events, marking her own reminders on a shared digital calendar. But his old-fashioned planner remained off-limits, viewed by him as a private vault of personal thoughts and crucial negotiations. Over time, Laurel had learned to respect his boundaries. After all, everyone needed a slice of privacy in a high-pressure world. Still, her curiosity about the gold ink entries only grew. While birthdays and anniversaries made sense, she occasionally spotted question marks on certain dates with the same shimmering ink. It wasn't just the planner that raised questions in Laurel's mind. Gradually, she noticed changes in his behavior. He'd become distant, irritable. He avoided eye contact when she asked about his day. He took more business trips than usual, and the phone conversations he had sounded far more personal than professional. She tried to brush off her suspicions, blaming them on her hormonal changes during pregnancy, but an uneasy feeling lingered. Then came an unexpected revelation. Laurel was tidying up Richard's study one afternoon. He had left in a rush, forgetting to lock the drawer where he kept his planner. At first, she only intended to straighten the desk, but the gleam of the planner's gold-edged pages caught her eye, as if beckoning her forward. She hesitated, torn between her respect for his privacy and a gnawing suspicion that something was terribly wrong. She finally picked it up, her heart pounding. As she flipped through, she recognized familiar entries, their wedding anniversary, her birthday, key business seminars. Then she landed on a page in late July, which was definitely her birthday month. She saw her own birthday listed, but in black ink this year, not gold. That alone was startling, because Richard had always noted her birthday in gold. A wave of disbelief crashed over her. Directly below the black ink of her birthday, with no space in between, was another name scribbled in gold: Vanessa Clark birthday. Laurel froze, feeling a surge of nausea that was only partly pregnancy-related. Who was Vanessa Clark? She scanned the surrounding weeks. There it was again, weekend trip with V in gold. Under appointments for dinner at exclusive restaurants, spa reservations, and even flight itineraries, the same name was etched in gold, overshadowing the black ink mentions of her own upcoming due date. Tears blurred her vision. She forced herself to read further. Some pages had little hearts drawn next to V, others had exclamation points. She noticed a pattern. Her own important dates had been replaced with scratchy black ink, pushed aside, while this, Vanessa's engagements, received the highlight of gold. Shaken to the core, she dropped the planner as if it were aflame. She couldn't fully process the betrayal, but her instincts screamed that she had unearthed something explosive. The man she believed cherished her was not only having an affair, but openly prioritizing someone else's birthday over hers in the very month she was due to give birth. And in the same color ink once reserved for her own special day. In that moment, Laurel understood her world would never be the same. Laurel tried to remain composed, but the turmoil inside her was overwhelming. She paced the living room, the planner resting on the table like a damning piece of evidence. As evening approached, her mind raced with questions. Should she confront Richard? Should she demand the truth, or wait to gather more information? In the end, she decided to be cautious. She called her closest friend, Caroline Summers, a confidant since college who lived just a few miles away. Over hushed tones on the phone, Laurel shared the discovery. Caroline gasped in horror, offering to drive over immediately, but Laurel insisted she was fine, at least physically. Emotionally, she felt like she was being torn apart by anger, sadness, and confusion. Caroline had heard rumors of high society affairs before it was almost a sport among the wealthy elite to whisper about extramarital liaisons. But she never imagined Richard would succumb to such a cliché. "Maybe it's just a misunderstanding," Caroline offered, her voice tinged with doubt. "He might be planning a surprise for you, or it could be some corporate contact." But they both knew the hearts and exclamation points in gold told a different story. That night, Laurel shared a tense dinner with Richard, who seemed lost in thought, barely noticing her reddened eyes. She wanted to scream at him, to throw the planner in his face, but fear kept her silent, fear that the confrontation might worsen her stress during pregnancy and harm the baby. So she swallowed her anger and decided to dig deeper. A few days later, she hired a discreet private investigator named Stephen Liu, recommended by a friend of Caroline's. Stephen specialized in spousal investigations and was known for his efficiency and utter discretion. Laurel provided him with the name Vanessa Clark, the known events from the planner, and the approximate times Richard claimed to be on business trips. In less than a week, Stephen returned with photographs and documents. Vanessa Clark, a striking brunette in her late 20s, was an aspiring model and social media influencer. She had a modest following, but was gaining traction thanks to her mysterious sponsor, a man who bankrolled her trips to Europe and her expensive photo shoots. The sponsor, the detective confirmed, was Richard Kensington. Laurel's heart sank as she flipped through the pictures. Richard and Vanessa at a private resort in Miami. Vanessa in the passenger seat of a sleek sports car with Richard at the wheel. Another shot showed them dining by candlelight at a Michelin-starred restaurant Richard had once promised to take Laurel to for her birthday. But the hardest photo to look at was the one with Vanessa wearing what appeared to be a diamond bracelet that Laurel herself had admired in a Cartier catalogue months before. In a matter of days, Laurel's worst fears had been confirmed. Richard wasn't just having a fling, he was leading a full-blown second life. He had replaced his pregnant wife's cherished place in his planner, and perhaps in his heart, with someone younger, captivating, and dangerously ambitious. Richard Kensington's social reputation was not built on business acumen alone. He was also known for hosting extravagant parties that attracted celebrities, politicians, and influential philanthropists. These events served as a prime networking platform, but also as a stage for Richard and Laurel to flaunt their seemingly perfect marriage. Since Laurel discovered the affair, she dreaded attending these functions. Her stomach, round with new life, felt increasingly heavy, both physically and emotionally. The upcoming gala was no exception. Organized to celebrate Richard's latest real estate victory, a chain of luxury condos in downtown Los Angeles, it promised to be a grand affair, complete with red carpets, paparazzi, and a 5-star catering service. Laurel had already decided to put on a brave face. In the swirl of flashing cameras and forced smiles, she would stand by Richard as though nothing were amiss. Perhaps, she reasoned, she could glean more information about his relationships or hear a careless whisper about Vanessa Clark. Caroline Summers accompanied her to the fitting for the gala gown, an elegant silk dress that concealed her baby bump in a flowing, glamorous style. But as she stood on the platform in front of a mirrored wall, Laurel felt hollow. Caroline tried to give her a pep talk, reminding her how strong she was. But any mention of strength only made Laurel wonder how she would survive the night, surrounded by people who might already suspect her husband's disloyalty. The night of the gala arrived. Under glittering chandeliers, Richard and Laurel made their entrance. Cameras clicked incessantly, capturing Laurel's gentle smile and Richard's proud posture. Guests congratulated them on the impending birth of their child, some even venturing to ask if they had settled on a name. Richard feigned delight, holding Laurel's hand or draping an arm around her waist for the perfect family portrait moment. But Laurel, seething inside, noted how quickly his hand would slip away once the cameras were pointed elsewhere. At one point, she heard a faint mention of Vanessa Clark from a group of younger attendees near the champagne fountain. Her senses sharpened, heart pounding. She edged closer, pretending to examine the floral arrangements. Fragments of conversation reached her ears. She's with a big-shot businessman. He's older, married. I think she was sporting a ridiculously big diamond bracelet. Laurel's stomach turned. Even here, among the city's elite, gossip about Vanessa and her sugar daddy was making rounds. She wanted to march over and ask them everything they knew, but it took every ounce of willpower to remain composed. Instead, she floated around the ballroom, exchanging pleasantries while scanning the crowd for any sign of the mistress herself. Though Vanessa Clark did not appear that evening, her presence was palpable in every hush, every glance that lingered just a moment too long on Laurel's growing belly. The tension was a silent, cunning snake, coiled in the corners, threatening to strike at any moment. Laurel left the gala with a deeper sense of dread, realizing that the rumor mill was in full swing and eventually it might devour her whole. In the following weeks, arguments between Laurel and Richard erupted over the smallest issues: what color to paint the nursery, whether to renovate their kitchen, or which baby shower invitations to send out. In truth, none of these details mattered to Laurel as much as the ache of betrayal. While she had not yet confronted him with the evidence, the constant tension weighed heavily on her heart and mind. One afternoon, as Laurel was resting in the sunroom, Richard appeared with brochures for luxury baby items. Instead of discussing them calmly, she snapped, "You seem to care more about images than reality. How about focusing on this family for once?" He was taken aback by her sharp tone, and a heated exchange followed. "What do you mean by that?" he asked, voice clipped, eyes narrowed. Laurel wanted to scream, to throw the damning photographs in his face. Instead, she tightened her jaw and said, "Nothing, just that I'm tired of feeling like an afterthought." Richard tried to shrug off her hostility, attributing it to pregnancy hormones, but beneath his dismissive exterior, there was a glimmer of unease in his eyes. At night, lying in bed, Laurel struggled to find rest. She felt the baby shift in her womb, a reminder of the innocent life caught in this emotional tempest. A tear rolled down her cheek as she quietly whispered, "I'm so sorry," to the unborn child. She felt guilty for not providing a harmonious environment, worried about the stress coursing through her body. In these dark moments, she found fleeting comfort in talking with Caroline and her mother, Frances Crane. Both encouraged her to confront Richard and insist on counseling. But Laurel feared that a direct confrontation would trigger an emotional explosion. Or worse, Richard might take drastic legal measures to control the narrative if divorce was on the table. After all, with his wealth and influence, he could manipulate the press, intimidate lawyers, and undermine her credibility. Still, Laurel couldn't keep silent forever. Her resentment festered, fueled by the knowledge of Vanessa Clark's lavish lifestyle at Richard's expense. The mismatched duality in her life, on one hand, preparing for her baby's arrival, and on the other, grappling with marital betrayal, was tearing her apart. Desperate for clarity, she returned to Stephen Liu, the private investigator, asking him to focus on any recent interactions between Richard and Vanessa. Stephen obliged, presenting Laurel with more photographs and even recordings, phone calls in which Richard promised Vanessa a luxury condo in Beverly Hills once it was completed. Hush, hush, credit card statements indicating extravagant purchases, and dinner reservations at exclusive restaurants right around the time Laurel was bedbound with morning sickness. The scale of Richard's deception weighed on Laurel like a heavy anchor. She began to wonder if she truly knew her husband at all. The kind man who once read poetry to her under starlit skies had transformed into a ruthless manipulator. And though she tried to rationalize his actions, blaming the corrupting nature of money and success, she couldn't deny that part of him had always craved more. More wealth, more power, more admiration, even if it meant sacrificing the person who had been there from the start. Vanessa Clark was no naive young woman led astray by a charming older millionaire. In her late 20s, she had already navigated the modeling and influencer circuit with a keen sense of ambition. She knew exactly what she wanted: fame, riches, and the prestige that came from being associated with someone of Richard Kensington's caliber. Over the months, Vanessa had posted subtle hints on her social media photographs at five-star resorts, cryptic captions about my generous mentor, and flashes of expensive jewelry that she never identified by name. For her growing fan base, she crafted a narrative of a self-made woman living a jet-set lifestyle. The real story was far more calculated. In private, Vanessa prodded Richard to buy her expensive gifts, to fund her travels, and to flaunt their relationship in exclusive circles. She constantly reminded him that she could easily find another sponsor if he proved too hesitant, and Richard, already enamored by her youth and boldness, complied with increasing willingness. Their romance had begun innocently enough. Vanessa was hired to model for one of Richard's luxury condo advertisements. Sparks flew, and soon one business lunch turned into a late dinner, which morphed into a clandestine trip out of state. That was nearly a year ago, around the time Laurel first became pregnant. Maybe it was the excitement of a forbidden liaison, or the intoxicating thrill of something new that kept Richard going back for more. Whatever the reason, he was now entwined with a woman who saw him as a stepping stone to a bigger life. For Vanessa, the pregnancy of Richard's wife was nothing but a complication. She bristled at the thought of his money being tied up in a child, or the possibility of Laurel overshadowing her in his heart. If anything, Vanessa saw Laurel's pregnancy as a reason to tighten her grip on Richard, ensuring he wouldn't back out for the sake of family. She even demanded that Richard promise to divorce Laurel after the baby was born. In her mind, her place in Richard's future needed to be secured, preferably with a legally binding commitment that guaranteed alimony or a massive payout should things go south. The demands continued to escalate. She wanted her birthday party to be a grand affair, overshadowing even Laurel's upcoming baby shower. But it never occurred to her that Richard had once reserved gold ink only for Laurel's birthday and their anniversary. For him to replace those precious dates with Vanessa's in that gleaming gold was a powerful symbol of how far he had strayed. Behind her polished smile, Vanessa was relentless. She pressured him to bring her to A-list events, to introduce her to film producers, to sign deals that would benefit her budding influencer career. And Richard, caught between the gravity of fatherhood and the seduction of Vanessa's world, found himself trapped. He no longer knew how to extricate himself without blowing up his marriage, losing credibility in business circles, and possibly facing a scandal that could cost him everything. So he kept feeding Vanessa's insatiable appetite for more, drifting further from the woman he had sworn to love and protect. Late one afternoon, Richard claimed he had back-to-back meetings at his downtown office. Laurel knew better. She discreetly tailed him in her car, heart racing. Was she really doing this? She'd never pictured herself as the kind of wife who trailed her husband like a detective, but her unborn child's future hung in the balance, and she needed answers. She followed him across town, struggling to keep a safe distance without losing him. After a few winding turns, his car pulled up to a chic boutique hotel. Laurel watched as he stepped out, glanced around as though checking for onlookers, then hurried inside. Minutes later, Vanessa Clark emerged from a taxi, wearing oversized sunglasses, her dark hair sweeping across her shoulders. She confidently strolled in the same direction. Laurel's breath caught in her throat. It was no mere business meeting. She felt a pang in her chest, a mixture of rage, humiliation, and heartbreak that almost knocked the air out of her. Despite her trembling hands, she remained in the car. Part of her wanted to storm into the hotel, confront them on the spot. Another part feared the repercussions. With a hand on her belly, she calmed herself, then texted Stephen Liu. He arrived within 30 minutes, a small camera in hand. From across the street they waited. After an hour, Richard and Vanessa stepped out together, looking comfortable in each other's company. Richard even leaned down to kiss her forehead. Stephen snapped several photos. Laurel's eyes burned with tears, but she forced herself not to look away. She needed this evidence, not just for any potential legal battles, but to confirm the truth her heart already knew. When the two parted ways, Vanessa sliding back into a taxi, Richard driving off in his luxury sedan, Laurel felt an overwhelming sadness. She thanked Stephen in a barely audible voice, then drove aimlessly for nearly an hour. She remembered the vows she and Richard had shared, his nervous laughter during their wedding speech, and how he had sworn to protect her from all harm. Those promises felt lifetimes away now. That night, she tried to confront him. "How was your meeting?" she asked, voice tense. He looked up from his phone, his expression guarded. "It was fine," he said tersely. They locked eyes for a moment. She searched his face for any sign of remorse, any flicker that suggested he might come clean. But he simply returned to checking his emails, as though the conversation was over. Laurel went to bed early, tears staining her pillow. She was done questioning her sanity. She was done giving him the benefit of the doubt. The photographs in her phone were proof of his disloyalty. They burned like embers in the quiet dark, urging her to make a move, yet she hesitated. Each time she felt fury surge within her, she pictured the baby's future caught in a bitter divorce, with a father who might vanish if pressed too hard. For the first time since her wedding day, Laurel found herself sleeping in the guest room. It was an emotional line in the sand, separating her from a man who refused to see the wreckage he was causing. Little did she know, events were already in motion that would force the truth into the open in the most public and humiliating way possible. As fate would have it, Vanessa Clark's birthday coincided painfully close to Laurel's. Richard had made elaborate plans for both, or so he thought. Laurel's birthday dinner, previously in gold ink for years, had been downgraded to a half-hearted dinner, WL scribbled in black. Meanwhile, the page for Vanessa's celebration sparkled with gold writing: V's B-Day, surprise party, Skyline Lounge. Laurel discovered these details in Richard's planner a second time, confirming that he was planning to attend Vanessa's party on the very weekend they'd normally celebrate Laurel's special day. In previous years, Richard would have whisked Laurel away to a luxury spa or some romantic getaway. But this year, all she got was a dinner reservation at a restaurant near their home, if it even happened at all. Furious but resolute, Laurel decided she would not spend her birthday alone. She rallied Caroline Summers and a few loyal friends, booking a private room at an upscale restaurant for her own celebration. It was a bold move, given her emotional state. But she refused to shrink into the shadows, pregnant or not. If Richard chose to attend his mistress's glittering event, let him. She would hold her head high and celebrate with people who genuinely cared for her. The night arrived. Laurel, glowing in a simple but elegant maternity dress, entered the private room with Caroline by her side. The table was filled with flowers, a small cake, and the warmth of friendship. Yet, every clink of cutlery against plates reminded her of what she had lost. She tried to engage in conversations about baby names and nursery decor, but the undercurrent of betrayal lingered, casting a shadow over the festivities. Around halfway through the meal, a latecomer arrived, Richard. He stood in the doorway, looking uncertain. Laurel's heart fluttered in confusion. Had he chosen her over Vanessa? He approached her, his face stiff with tension. "Happy birthday," he murmured, planting a quick kiss on her cheek. She nodded, mustering a polite smile. Laurel's friends eyed him with a mixture of suspicion and pity. Caroline's husband, Mark, shook Richard's hand, but gave him a look that said, "I know what you've done." The atmosphere was awkward, to say the least. After barely an hour of strained small talk, Richard excused himself to take a phone call. 30 minutes passed. He did not return. Concerned, Laurel stepped outside to find him. Instead, she discovered one of the restaurant staff informing her that Richard had left in a rush. He hadn't even bothered to say goodbye. Trying to maintain composure, Laurel rejoined her guests and pushed through the rest of the evening. But her mind was elsewhere, wondering where Richard had gone, even though she already knew. He was likely speeding across town to Vanessa's surprise party, leaving his pregnant wife behind on her birthday. A sense of finality crept over her. The chasm between them was now undeniable, and there would be no more illusions of a happy family life. A part of her wanted to cry, but another part felt strangely liberated. She had done all she could to salvage this relationship, and if he would rather be with his mistress, so be it. Laurel could not predict that the next few days would bring a revelation that would shock everyone, a twist that would make his betrayal look like child's play compared to the deeper secrets hidden in the gold ink of Richard's planner. Laurel spent the day after her birthday in a haze of disillusionment and quiet rage. She had accepted that Richard was likely with Vanessa for the remainder of the night, if not longer. The fact that he had left her pregnant and alone on her special day drove home just how broken their marriage had become. Early that evening, Laurel's phone buzzed. It was Stephen Liu, the private investigator, requesting an urgent meeting. Anxiety gnawed at her as she drove to his modest office in a nondescript building on the outskirts of the city. Over the past weeks, Stephen had been thorough yet respectful, never calling her in without cause. When she arrived, Stephen's expression told her everything. The news was significant. I looked deeper into Richard's financials, he began, opening a folder stuffed with documents. He's been funneling large sums into offshore accounts, some under Vanessa's name, but others under a different alias, Regina Caldwell. Laurel's brow furrowed. Who was Regina Caldwell? Another mistress? Another business partner? Stephen shook his head, leaning forward. That's the twist. Regina Caldwell appears to be an older woman in her 60s, living in upstate New York. No clear connection to modeling or real estate. But here's the kicker. A birth certificate tied to that name suggests that Regina Caldwell is actually an alias for none other than Richard's biological mother. Laurel felt her stomach drop. She knew Richard's mother had died when he was young, or so he had always claimed. Are you sure? She asked, her voice cracking. Stephen nodded. I traced it back. Richard's mother is alive, living under a different name. He's been sending her monthly deposits for years, basically paying her to keep quiet. But about what? That's what I've been trying to figure out. He laid out more papers, old newspaper clippings from Philadelphia about a mysterious disappearance, property deeds that changed hands abruptly. The puzzle pieces pointed to one disturbing conclusion. Richard's mother had been involved in some sort of legal battle or scandal many years ago, something big enough that she relocated under an assumed identity. Laurel stared at the evidence, mind reeling. If Richard had lied about his mother's death, what else had he lied about? And how did Vanessa Clark fit into this? Stephen then showed her a recent phone record, a conference call Richard had made to a high-powered law firm in Manhattan. It seems he's making arrangements, Stephen said carefully, possibly to rewrite his will or create new trusts. If these go through, Laurel, he could be setting up funds that bypass you and the child, funneling everything to Vanessa or even to his mother. Laurel's pulse hammered in her ears. Everything she had believed about Richard, that he was a self-made man, that he had lost his mother tragically, was crumbling. She realized with horror that if he was manipulating his estate, he could strip her and the baby of financial security, leaving them with nothing. Even with the prenup they had signed, the scale of his betrayal could leave her at a significant disadvantage. Tears sprang to her eyes, but an unfamiliar resolve also took root in her heart. She couldn't let him destroy her child's future, no matter how painful, how humiliating. She had to stand up to him, secrets or not. She wouldn't let him bury her under a mountain of lies. Laurel returned home that evening, the evidence from Stephen Liu heavy in her bag. She found Richard in his study, scribbling in his leather-bound planner, no doubt updating some new scheme in black or gold ink. He didn't look up as she entered. Richard, she began, voice quivering but determined. We need to talk. He turned to her with a slight scowl, as though annoyed by the interruption. Can it wait? I'm in the middle of something important. So am I, she shot back. Her boldness caught him off guard. He closed his planner and leaned back in his chair, eyebrows lifted in surprise. Laurel took a deep breath. I know about Vanessa Clark. I know you've been lying to me for months." Her words rang in the silent room, forcing Richard to face the inescapable. "And I know you've been funneling money to someone named Regina Caldwell, someone you claim is your dead mother." Richard's face went deathly pale. For a brief moment he stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. Then he gathered himself, anger flooding his features. "You had me investigated." His voice was low, trembling with fury. "You had no right. I have every right." Laurel shot back, eyes brimming with tears. "You replaced me on your calendar with another woman's birthday in gold ink. You've put our child's future at risk." "Don't tell me about rights." She threw down the stack of evidence on the desk, photographs and documents spilling out. Richard stared at them, his nostrils flaring. "You have no idea what you're getting into," he hissed. "You think you can just ruin everything I've built, everything you've built?" Laurel repeated, aghast. "We built this life together. I stood by you. I supported you when no one else would. And this is how you repay me." She motioned to the incriminating photographs. "You throw everything away for a fling with an opportunist, and then you lie about your mother." He pressed a hand over his eyes, looking suddenly exhausted. "It's complicated," he muttered, voice strained. "Vanessa, it started as a mistake, then it just spiraled. I never intended to hurt you." He glanced at the documents referring to Regina Caldwell. "As for my mother, I had reasons to cut her out of my life. She was dangerous to me, to my reputation. I told everyone she died so no one would ask questions." Laurel scoffed at his self-centeredness. "Your reputation. That's all you ever care about." Richard's anger flared again. "Don't act like you're some saint. You benefited from my success too. You lived in luxury, never wanting for anything." She felt the sting of his words but refused to be intimidated. "Yes, I loved our life, but I loved you more. And that man I loved is gone, replaced by someone I don't recognize. Someone who would toss his pregnant wife aside for a mistress, then hide money offshore while rewriting his will." Silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. Somewhere in the distance, a clock chimed, marking the relentless march of time. Richard slumped in his chair, eyes darting as though calculating his next move. Laurel, standing strong, finally realized that the man before her was not the romantic husband she once idolized, but a stranger guided by greed and secrets. She turned on her heel and walked out, leaving him amid the scattered evidence and his empty justifications. A single thought pulsed through her mind. Everything was about to change, and there was no going back. The confrontation triggered a domino effect. Laurel wasted no time consulting a lawyer, John Harrington, a family friend known for his strategic brilliance in court. When she showed him the evidence of Richard's affair, the secret accounts, and his attempts to sideline her financially, John's eyes lit with determination. He promised her that, if it came to divorce, they had more than enough ammunition to ensure she and the baby would be protected. Meanwhile, word about Richard's secret life began circulating among the tight-knit circles of wealthy investors and philanthropists. No one knew the full story, but fragments leaked whispers of an affair, misappropriated funds, and shady dealings. Clients started pulling out of negotiations for fear of being caught in the crossfire of scandal. Richard's real estate empire began to tremble. Deals that were once assured halted abruptly, casting doubt on his entire portfolio. As if that weren't enough, one of his key business associates, Jacob Moore, confronted him about rumors of offshore accounts. Jacob had built his reputation on transparency and wanted no association with a partner who might be involved in potential fraud. Richard tried to downplay the allegations, but in the world of high finance, mere rumors could sink a career. Soon, Jacob Moore severed ties publicly, leading others to do the same. Investors demanded explanations that Richard could not provide without incriminating himself. Vanessa Clark sensed the shifting winds. She noticed fewer gifts arriving, fewer lavish dinners. The generous mentor who had once showered her with gold and diamonds was now too busy fighting off business collapses and personal disgrace to cater to her whims. Frustrated, she threatened to go to the tabloids to sell her story of how Richard Kensington had wooed her with promises of marriage and wealth. She demanded hush money to keep quiet. This only further drained Richard's liquidity. His attorneys scrambled to keep Vanessa at bay while also handling the legal wrangling that was sure to come from Laurel. The man who once seemed unstoppable was now desperately juggling the fallout of his own deeds. At nights, he sat alone in his study, the leather-bound planner open to blank pages, no more glowing gold ink marking triumphant future events. It was as though his life had been stripped of color, leaving him with nothing but bleak prospects. Laurel, meanwhile, found unexpected allies. Old friends from Philadelphia reached out, offering emotional and even financial support if needed. Caroline Summers helped line up babysitting services and a circle of support for the upcoming birth. Frances Crane, Laurel's mother, flew in from her retirement home to stay by Laurel's side, ensuring she never felt alone. While the betrayal still hurt, Laurel discovered a new wellspring of inner strength. She refused to be the downtrodden wife society might expect her to be. As her due date approached, she busied herself preparing for the baby, transforming a spare bedroom into a cozy nursery, lined with soft pastel colors and whimsical artwork. Despite her marriage crumbling, she found hope in the life she was about to bring into the world. And while Richard scrambled to save his empire, Laurel made peace with the notion that her child's father might not be the steadfast family man she'd once believed him to be. Laurel's contractions started one muggy afternoon in late August. She had just returned from a prenatal checkup when she felt the first pang of labor. Gripped by a wave of simultaneous fear and excitement, she called Caroline, who rushed her to the hospital. The doctors confirmed that the baby was on its way, and Laurel was prepped for delivery. During the stressful hours that followed, she couldn't help but wonder if Richard would appear. Despite everything, he was still the child's father. Word reached Richard through a family friend, and eventually he did turn up at the hospital, face drawn and eyes bloodshot. He hovered by the waiting room, uncertain if Laurel would allow him in the delivery room. Laurel, needing to focus on the momentous task of giving birth, decided that her own well-being and that of her child mattered most. She granted him entry, but made it clear they would discuss nothing of their marital issues until after the baby was safely born. What should have been a beautiful, if painful moment was tinged with emotional turmoil. Richard held Laurel's hand, tears glistening in his eyes as their child finally entered the world, a baby girl, her cries filling the sterile room with new life. "She's beautiful," Laurel whispered, overwhelmed by love. In that fleeting instant, something in Richard's expression seemed to crack. Whether it was remorse or genuine happiness, Laurel couldn't be sure, but the euphoria of the birth was soon overshadowed by a shocking twist. As Laurel recuperated, Richard stepped outside to make a phone call. He never returned. Hours passed, and when Caroline went to check, she found that Richard had vanished. The next morning, a news report surfaced. Richard Kensington had been detained by authorities for questioning related to financial fraud, specifically concerning offshore accounts and tax evasion. Laurel's head spun. Everything was happening too fast. She clutched her newborn daughter, tears streaming down her face. Even in this moment of joy, Richard's actions overshadowed what should have been a peaceful time of bonding. Word spread quickly, and soon paparazzi were camped outside the hospital, hungry for photos of the new mother and the sensational downfall of her millionaire husband. It turned out that someone, likely Vanessa Clark, had leaked financial records to a rival real estate firm, which promptly handed them to the authorities in exchange for immunity. The leaked documents showed a complex web of shell companies tied to Richard's name, along with possible bribes to local officials to expedite construction permits. With multiple allegations piling up, law enforcement acted swiftly. Laurel now faced a complicated path forward. She was a new mother, physically and emotionally drained, yet her life was thrust under a microscope of legal scrutiny. She had to make tough choices about custody, finances, and whether to file for immediate divorce, all while figuring out how to nurture this innocent new life in her arms. As she gazed down at her sleeping daughter, whom she named Lily Laurel, silently vowed that no matter the chaos swirling around them, she would protect her child at all costs. And she would never again allow Richard or any man to control her destiny through a gilded illusion of love. The weeks that followed Lily's birth were a whirlwind of media attention and legal battles. Laurel, still recovering, found herself on the front page of tabloids, next to headlines like Millionaire mogul's secret mistress exposed and Scandal Rock's Kensington real estate. Paparazzi camped outside her home, hoping to catch a glimpse of the new mother. Some unscrupulous reporters even tried to sneak into the hospital where Lily had her postnatal checkups. Caroline Summers became Laurel's de facto spokesperson. Shielding her from the worst of the media frenzy, Caroline offered vague updates, insisting that Laurel and baby Lily were doing fine and would not be commenting on Richard's legal troubles. Behind the scenes, Laurel was locked in discussions with her lawyer, John Harrington, about how to protect her assets and secure child support for Lily. To add another layer of stress, Vanessa Clark emerged with a salacious interview in a tabloid magazine. She claimed that Richard had promised her the world, including marriage, expensive properties, and a luxury lifestyle. She insisted she was as much a victim as Laurel, painting herself as a misunderstood woman who had fallen for a powerful man's lies. Laurel snorted in disbelief when she read the article, recognizing Vanessa's manipulative streak. Vanessa wasn't a naive victim. She'd actively lured Richard deeper into the affair, leveraging his vulnerabilities for her own gain. At the same time, Richard languished under house arrest at his Beverly Hills mansion, awaiting trial. His assets were largely frozen, and many of his business partners refused to return his calls. Once revered as a visionary real estate developer, he was now seen as a cautionary tale. He reached out to Laurel multiple times, begging for forgiveness and pleading that they stand together as a family. He insisted that if she publicly supported him, it would help mitigate the fallout from his financial wrongdoings, but Laurel was done sacrificing herself. Any love she had once held for Richard was drowned out by the memory of him leaving her hospital room to be arrested, by the images of Vanessa flaunting diamond bracelets meant for Laurel. Her main priority now was Lily ensuring her daughter was healthy, safe, and raised with integrity. With John Harrington's help, Laurel filed for legal separation, requesting full custody of Lily. Though the process would take time, she had a strong case. Richard's affair and alleged financial improprieties painted him as an unstable figure. She made it clear that if he wanted any role in Lily's life, he needed to sort out his legal issues and prove he could be a fit father. Otherwise, the courts would have no trouble granting Laurel's request. Meanwhile, Laurel leaned on her support network, which expanded surprisingly. Old college friends, even distant relatives, sent gifts and messages of encouragement. Some who once envied Laurel's lavish life began to admire her resilience. The public narrative slowly shifted from pitying her to respecting her strength. She also found a new sense of purpose in motherhood, the serene bond she formed with Lily, offering a counterpoint to the chaos swirling outside. One day, as Laurel was rocking Lily to sleep, she remembered a conversation she had with Richard years ago, long before the millions and the scandal. Back then, he had joked that money was just ink on a check, whereas true wealth was ink written on your heart. Laurel felt a bitter twist of irony now. Richard's golden ink had once symbolized love and commitment, but eventually it became the sign of his ultimate betrayal. Yet here, in her arms, was Lily proof that even from the darkest chapters, something pure and hopeful can emerge. In the months that followed, Richard went to court. The trial was a media circus. Vanessa Clark testified under oath, distancing herself from any criminal wrongdoing while admitting that she had been aware of certain questionable transactions. Family secrets about Richard's mother, Regina Caldwell, also came to light. She herself testified through a deposition, revealing that she and Richard had faked her death to evade creditors from years past. The entire fiasco painted a portrait of a man who climbed social and financial ladders by weaving intricate lies, some out of desperation, others out of sheer ambition. In the end, Richard was found guilty of multiple counts of tax fraud and sentenced to several years in federal prison. The judge acknowledged that Richard had cooperated to some extent, but the scale of his deceit was too large for leniency. When the verdict was read, he slumped forward, face ashen, as though the weight of his world had finally crushed him. Laurel watched the live feed of the sentencing from home, Lily cooing softly at her side. She felt a complicated mix of relief, sadness, and resolve. It was a tragic end to what had once been a love story, but also a new beginning for her and her daughter. The illusions were shattered, replaced by the real possibility of building a stable life on her own terms. With her divorce eventually finalized, Laurel received a portion of Richard's estate, enough to ensure Lily would never want for anything. Though she bore the stigma of a high-profile scandal, she also garnered respect for how she handled the ordeal with dignity, no sensational tell-all interviews, and a steadfast focus on her child. She continued to work with charitable foundations she had once championed alongside Richard, but now she did so under her own name, forging her own path. Caroline Summers remained her closest ally. Together, they embarked on new ventures, Laurel investing in a small chain of boutique maternity stores, Caroline offering marketing expertise. Whenever doubt crept in, Laurel reminded herself how far she had come, from the shattered illusions of a grand marriage to the fulfillment of a life guided by honesty and unconditional love for her daughter. And so ended the saga of gold ink and heartbreak, of a millionaire's reckless disregard for the very vows he had once made. In its wake, Laurel Kensington rose from the wreckage, stronger, wiser, and determined to give Lily the childhood free from the deceptions that had nearly consumed them all. In the end, the golden ink that once marked Richard Kensington's precious milestones became the symbol of his greatest undoing. A single, glittering oversight on a calendar revealed more than just an affair. It exposed a life built on fragile lies and hidden agendas. For Laurel, it was the catalyst she needed to break free from the shadows of deceit and carve a path of independence for herself and her daughter, Lily. This story reminds us that the truth, no matter how painful, holds the power to set us free. Secrets may temporarily shine like gold, but when exposed to the light, they lose their luster, revealing the darker realities beneath. Thank you for joining me on this journey through heartbreak, betrayal, and ultimately, renewal. If you found this story captivating, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Your support helps bring more stories to life. Stay tuned for the next dramatic tale.